The Curious Life of Robert Todd Lincoln. Robert Todd Lincoln was Abraham Lincoln's eldest son, born in 1843. He's seen standing in this family portrait here. His two brothers shown here are Willie and Tad. The family generally called him Bobby as he was growing up and continued to call him Bobby even in his later life. This drawing of the Lincoln family shows a portrait of son Edward on the wall. He died in 1850 at age 4 back in Springfield, Illinois. Like President John F. and Jackie Kennedy 100 years later, the Lincolns also had a child who died while they were in the White House, Patrick Kennedy and Willie Lincoln. Both couples also had only one child who lived into their later adult years, Robert Todd Lincoln and Caroline Kennedy. In 1863, at the Jersey City train station, Robert Todd Lincoln almost lost his life when he had slipped under the tracks. Edwin Booth, the brother of John Wilkes Booth, rescued the 20-year-old Bobby. After graduating from Harvard College in 1864, Robert Todd Lincoln attended Harvard Law School for a few months. In January 1865, Mary Todd Lincoln, his mother, finally yielded to allow her oldest son Bobby to join General Grant's staff. While serving with General Grant, Robert Todd Lincoln witnessed the surrender of the Confederate armies on April 9, 1865 at Appomattox Courthouse. Just 5 days after Robert E. Lee's surrender, President and Mrs. Lincoln planned to see the British comedy Our American Cousin here at Ford's Theater in Washington. Their son Bobby declined an invitation to attend with his parents. Tired from being at the battlefront, he rested back at the White House. Now, Robert was not the only one declining the president's invitation to the theater that night. A total of 15 people were invited to attend, and they all declined until Henry Rathbone and his fiancée Clara Harris accepted the invite. Lincoln greatly enjoyed the theater. It was a good distraction from the presidency. He had once sent an invitation to the lead actor of a play he enjoyed a couple of years back to visit him at the White House. The actor, however, just ignored the president's invitation. His name was John Wilkes Booth. The president and his party sat in the presidential box at Ford's Theater. It was Good Friday, April 14, 1865. Actor and Southern sympathizer John Wilkes Booth secretly entered the rear of the president's box about 10:25 p.m. Let's watch and see what happens from the Lincoln movie that came out in 2012.
Sure to hit the mark in just about most things as well as shooting. Black apples, asshole.
Oh, that's my favorite.
Tyrannus!
Almost immediately, doctors and theater attendees carried Lincoln across 10th Street to the Peterson House, where the president was diagonally laid out on this bed. Robert Todd Lincoln arrived from the White House around 11:30 p.m. and stayed at his father's bedside throughout the night. The president died the next morning at 7:22 a.m. without ever regaining consciousness. Edwin Stanton, Secretary of War, proclaimed, "Now he belongs to the ages." At the bedside when his father died the next morning, Robert Todd Lincoln was devastated, and he wept openly for hours thereafter. Following his father's assassination, Robert, his mother, and brother Tad moved to Chicago. Robert studied law at what is now Northwestern University. After graduating, he built a successful law practice and became wealthy while representing corporate clients. Only 6 years later, another tragic family death. In 1871, Robert Lincoln's only surviving brother, Tad, died at the age of 18, leaving his mother devastated with grief. Again, Robert Todd Lincoln, who was already concerned about his mother's eccentric behavior, and fearing that she was a danger to herself, arranged to have her committed to a psychiatric hospital in Batavia, Illinois in 1875. Mary Todd Lincoln stayed only a few months at Bellevue Place, a private upscale sanitarium. Soon the sanitarium director declared Mrs. Lincoln well enough to live in Springfield. This created a never-reconciled estrangement between Robert Todd Lincoln and his mother. In 1881, Robert Todd Lincoln was appointed as Secretary of War by the incoming new president, James A. Garfield. July 2, 1881, Lincoln was entering the old Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station in Washington, D.C. on 6th Street to meet with President Garfield. Just as Robert approached the president inside the station, shots rang out. Lincoln was an eyewitness to the shooting. President Garfield was mortally wounded, dying 80 days later. After President Garfield's assassination, Robert Todd Lincoln continued as War Secretary until 1885 under President Chester Alan Arthur, who succeeded Garfield. Later, in the Benjamin Harrison presidency, 1889 to 1893, he served as United States Minister to the United Kingdom. After serving as minister, Lincoln returned to private practice as a lawyer in Chicago. He became general counsel of the Pullman Railcar Company. After founder George Pullman died in 1897, Robert Todd Lincoln became the company's president. In September 1901, President William McKinley invited Robert Todd Lincoln and his family to attend the Pan American Exposition, being celebrated in Buffalo, New York. In the receiving line at the Temple of Music in the exposition, as President McKinley reached to shake Leon Czolgosz's hand, 2 shots rang out from a revolver held in his bandaged hand. Robert Todd Lincoln was on the exposition grounds, and he rushed to see President McKinley. In a few days, pleased that President McKinley was recovering well, the Lincoln family returned to Chicago. But soon the president took a turn for the worse, and he died from gangrene on September 14, 1901. At this point, Lincoln himself recognized these curious coincidences. Lincoln declined any future presidential meeting. Since he had high name recognition, he was often mentioned as a presidential or a vice presidential candidate, but he adamantly refused each time. He noted, "There's a certain fatality about presidential functions when I am present." In 1922, Robert Todd Lincoln took part in the dedication ceremonies for the Lincoln Memorial. Ex-President and Chief Justice William Howard Taft, President Warren Harding, and Robert Todd Lincoln all here at the dedication of the Lincoln Memorial on May 30th, 1922. After meeting Robert Todd Lincoln in 1922, President Harding unexpectedly died the next year in San Francisco. He was returning from a long cross-country tour with a visit to Alaska Territory, which was a presidential first. He was having some stomach pains, a fever, and shortness of breath, but there was no reason to suspect that he was about to die. Robert Todd Lincoln passed away at his Vermont home called Hildene on July 26, 1926, 6 days before his 83rd birthday. He is buried in this tomb at Arlington National Cemetery. Just 37 years after Robert Todd Lincoln's burial at Arlington, and just a couple of hundred yards away from Lincoln's tomb, is the grave of John F. Kennedy. Therefore, Robert Todd Lincoln is the only person in the history of the USA with a connection to all 4 presidential assassinations. Robert Todd Lincoln's grave in Arlington also, and not coincidentally, overlooks the memorial to his father, Abraham Lincoln. A line from the John Fitzgerald Kennedy grave to Robert Todd Lincoln's grave points directly to the Lincoln Memorial.
Everybody here, see my old friend Bobby. Can you tell me where he's gone? I thought I saw him walking up over the hill with Abraham and Martin